Hey everybody, welcome back. In today's video, we're going to have a look at Bitcoin. Now, if you clicked on this video and you saw the thumbnail and you saw the title, you are probably wondering why I think the spot Bitcoin ETF is not going to affect Bitcoin's price really. And in a way that's misleading because it will affect Bitcoin's price, but it's not going to affect Bitcoin's price in a way that is unusual. And if you're here for the quick answer, you can't be bothered watching the whole video and you don't want to understand where my reasoning comes from or why I believe this, really quick cliff notes is basically that every halving leading up to it, we have a pump and a dump of some sorts every time, whether it's just before, just afterwards, we always have a big move up and a big move down. There's usually a strong correction at some point, and whether the pump comes first or second, it kind of doesn't really change anything. Even here we saw huge price volatility at Bitcoin's inception when it first got a chart back in 2012 and it went through its first halving. We still had crazy volatility even though it was still early days. So every halving that we've seen, Bitcoin has gone crazy with its price leading up to the halving. And this time, the narrative that is most likely going to cause some crazy price action is a spot Bitcoin ETF. And if we zoom in already, we saw that a few hours ago, there was the fake announcement from the SEC account, the compromised Twitter account that said the spot Bitcoin ETF had been approved, hadn't been approved. Bitcoin went right up and now it's right back down. So you can see the price is extremely volatile and it basically went up a grand, in a second, and then right back down. So we're already a bit of a powder keg right now in terms of what's going to happen. And ultimately, in my opinion, if we get the spot Bitcoin ETF and it's positive for Bitcoin's price action, because there is a chance that it's not positive for Bitcoin's price action. If it is positive, you might see a strong move up. We might come up to something like 50k, I don't know, below 50k, I'm not sure. And then after a huge move like that, where Bitcoin is extremely overbought, we're likely to see some sort of a correction. And whether that correction brings us back down to pre-ETF prices, I don't know. You have to remember that an ETF doesn't actually really affect the market value of Bitcoin. It's just a lump sum of Bitcoin that is bought and then traded on a private exchange. It's not bought on the open market. So ultimately, sort of after this launch, where the Bitcoin ETF is launched and lots of Bitcoin is bought, there's a good chance that it won't affect the price of Bitcoin much after that point. It'll just be the hype and the excitement of having the availability of a Bitcoin ETF. So once the hype from the launch has died down, even if the value of Bitcoin on its ETF skyrockets, that won't technically have any real correlation to the open market value of Bitcoin. Now it could bring it up, but I have a feeling this hype will cause a pump and then a dump, or it'll be a sell the news like the Shanghai upgrade with Ethereum back in 2022, September time, and we just have a bit of a drop from Bitcoin. We come down to some key support level, maybe it's 37 here. You can see there's this arrow and range that hasn't been explained yet, and we'll get into that. In fact, we'll remove it for now. It might come down to some key range, whether that's to sort of this low here that we were at a few weeks ago, who knows? But then it could ultimately rally up. All we've seen before, all we can be sure on is what's happened in the past for BTC, and whatever the event was, whether it was COVID, whether it was God knows what this was, like Mt. Gox or something, I have no clue. Bitcoin has rallied and dumped into the halving, but then ultimately continued to rally after the halving and then put in new all-time highs. So today we're going to go through the historic price action of Bitcoin leading up to these halvings, and we're going to take a look at time frames, how long they rallied for before the halving and before these crashes took place, and we're going to look at a few interesting metrics like this blue range that I pointed out before that was up here, how far they moved down from the price they entered the halving at. So on the day of the halving, how far have they fallen from that current all-time high at the time, so this was the all-time high for Bitcoin at this point when it entered the halving. And we might as well get straight into it. I mean, we can see from 2018, when we put in this high, 2017, we see that Bitcoin, zooming in, dropped 53% from its all-time high down to where it crossed, where the halving date took place. It dropped 53% from where it was from its all-time high on this day. And if we take a look at the halving before that, we can see that it didn't drop too much, but we can see the all-time high here. Bitcoin crossed over the halving dates at a lower price, a much lower price than its previous all-time high. And it was about minus 40%, give or take. So we can see that so far, it's a common theme. Even if we go back here, we don't have an all-time high price, but if we do assume that this is the highest point, or even this guy, it still drops 25%, you see? So there is usually some kind of a drop-off. It enters the halving below its all-time high. Its previous, already existing all-time high. So if we go to current day, and we take a look at, we can consider either of these first-time high For me, what I've done here is I've taken the first peak, which, has so far always been the all-time high, but we can use the all-time high as well. It's kind of doesn't really matter too much. We can see that currently we are down 30%, almost bang on, or well, but not even, we're about here right now, which is 35% down from the all-time high. And the time we have until the halving is about 4 months, give or take. It's late April, it's currently early January. Is it possible that in this time we see some sort of a drastic move up and down? Well, let's see if we've had that before. If we go here, we have this crazy sell-off followed by a pretty impressive rally, a recovery rally, where we sort of come back to pre-sell-off lows. And if we see how long this went on for, we can see it was about 50 days, a month and a half. So we can see that's possible. And then we come to a level where we rally into the halving and continue to go up. If we go back to the last halving, we can see, we had a pretty impressive rally here leading into it. That happened over a month, basically. And then we had a sell-off after the halving. So you could say that really it was over just under 3 months. And a part of it took place after the halving. But here we still have time for that 3 months, those 82 days to play out. If we take it from here, we have over 100 days. So we could definitely have that play out and it would still be in time for the halving. And if we even go back to the first halving information that we have on Bitcoin, we can see that we have this really crazy price movement from this sort of a time. And let me actually redo that because I'm not factoring in the low. We have a crazy price movement of over 20 days where Bitcoin moves up over 130% from its low to its high. So it's definitely possible that we see some kind of a crazy price movement over the next few months, because it's happened every single time. So statistically, the odds are in the favor of it actually happening, aside from nothing happening. Also, like I said, we're at a very explosive time with Bitcoin. We've been on a very strong rally with not really any significant corrections that have held. Like we've had pullbacks for sure, like many of them, but we've blown up through them afterwards. And we're currently very close to our all-time high, like 35% down, but it'll only take Bitcoin a move of, a 54% move up, 55% move up to be at its all-time high, which isn't difficult. This year it's done a 3x. So it only have to do a third of what it's done, basically, to get there. Now, it is difficult, of course, but to put in an all-time high in 2024, I think is unrealistic, but not impossible. Again, like we've seen this stuff happen. And also we know that after the halving, Bitcoin generally trends up. And we see that it does trend up pretty well. Like after the halving, before the Bullrun year, if we take it from that point, we see Bitcoin does make some pretty strong moves, goes up 160%. That's what it did last halving. What did it do last time before the Bullrun year? 40%, give or take. 40, 50%. Not too crazy. What did it do the first halving? Went up 10,000%. So it's kind of like a bit of a gamble. You could even sort of say here that, this sort of halving year, it didn't really do much. And that's fair. And you might say there's no sort of COVID or any crazy money inflation like that to give us any sort of a parabolic movement. You could say here was too early on, and this was just all speculation and super low caps, so Bitcoin's price moved way up. That's fair. You could say here, this was a more realistic one because Bitcoin had a bigger audience, and you could say there was no huge monetary spending this year, so Bitcoin had a very relative, slow-cooking 2024 year, halving year, even though this was, of course, 2016. And you could say this one here was caused by the sort of COVID money printing. So a lot of money found its way into Bitcoin, and because of that, the price was able to move very well in the halving year of 2020. So for this year, we can maybe say that, well, we don't have these monetary conditions where money's being given away for literally free for nothing. We have conditions that are more like this, where it's just a general macro environment. Nothing too special is happening. Rates are up, so it's a bit more difficult. There's not as much free money being thrown around. Money's more expensive. And even though there's a lot of hype in the crypto space, and this last year has done really well over sort of the rate hike year as well, when rates were going up, we might see a bit of a cool off where hype slowly dies down. When the Bitcoin ETF is approved after the halving, people might become a bit uninterested for a few months, especially over the summertime, which is often quite usual. It's, the summer lull where nothing really happens for the months of summer because people are out enjoying their lives. We could see something like that take place. Another sort of aspect that I wanted to look at before we move on to other charts is how long Bitcoin rallied into the halving for. So when did Bitcoin start rallying up to the halving? Like, where was the low that Bitcoin moved up to when it reached the halving? And we can see here that currently been quite a while in the current cycle that we're on, actually the longest we'll see. And so has the last one, been quite a similar time frame. This is accounting for all the days so far, and that's been 472 days, year and a half. This last cycle has been more or less the same amount of time, pretty long period from not exactly its lows, but when it started to rally up. And again, that's the key I'm going for here. You'll see as well, like the low was technically before of when I took this line from, but I'm only measuring from when we started to significantly rally up. Again, moving back here to the halving before last, 2016 time frame, we can see a much shorter time frame, only 320 days, less than a year. Even though the move, you could argue, is more impressive. If we take it from here to the halving date, 224%, we're currently at a 186% move, I think, something like that. Yeah, 200%, so they are actually pretty similar, to be fair, but this one's gone on for a much longer time frame. Again, we could pull back. We don't have the price of the halving date yet. This could be the yearly high of 2024. We don't know. But just something to be aware of, previous years, they've been shorter and they've more or less entered the halving at their high. Like as well, if you go to this one, you can see it's very difficult to put a time frame on it, especially as the data is quite, you could say, unreliable. But this one, under 400 days, more or less bang on a year, and Bitcoin enters its halving at basically its yearly high, close to its all-time high in a way. And again, like same here, from the bottom of this rally, or when it starts to rally, Bitcoin just only goes up and is quite strong all the way up and enters the halving at not too far away at 40%. When we take a look at Bitcoin during this year, it's a much longer time frame, and Bitcoin enters the halving at a lower price than compared to previous halvings in terms of percentage move, not just from all-time high, but from moves up. We can see here, if we take this move and measure it, it's 175%. That's a 50% lower move, less of a move than what we got here. For example, 235, even more than 50%. So it kind of, to be honest, it's a bit of a mix, because in terms of monetary policy and the current macro environment, we're probably more relatable to this halving. However, in terms of length and duration that we've been rallying up from, we are more similar to the previous halving of sort of 2019, 2020 time. So that's something you're going to have to look at yourself and make your own decision. Now in this video as well, I do also want to take a look at the Bitcoin dominance, which is more of an aggressive chart to look at, especially with what I've drawn so far. But what I am going to try and get across today, or at least my opinion of what I think will happen, is that Bitcoin dominance still needs to go up. And what that basically means is that we are still not in a generally bullish crypto, well, we can be in a bullish crypto environment, but a more Bitcoin heavy bullish environment, which does imply that the Bitcoin ETF will be good for Bitcoin, but it means that, well, it might mean that Bitcoin suffers less than altcoins. In my opinion, I think we are probably due a little bit of a correction. And again, that might not happen. This sort of volatility spike that I talk of before each halving might not happen. Just might not happen. It could only be up from here, although it's very rarely the case with crypto. And even today, I heard some crazy stat that huge amounts of money had been wiped over the last 24 hours on long and short positions of crypto because of the fake announcement from Gary and then price correction. So still a dangerous time, and it is still volatile, even if the moves aren't that crazy. But zooming in, I'm going to change this to weekly quickly so we can get a much better look. We can see that obviously the dominance has recently been trending up for basically since a year, well over a year, since August, end of September time basically, of 2022, Bitcoin dominance has been trending up. And I think Bitcoin dominance will continue to trend up until basically the Bullrun year, which I believe will be 2025. I do sort of put weight in the 4-year cycle. I would lean to that being true because so far I don't have too many signs to believe otherwise. Maybe after the end of this bull run or after the next halving, we might see a change. I know that halvings are due to slow down, I'm pretty sure, but hash rate could continue to go up. So who knows, really? Who knows? All I do know is that Bitcoin dominance has gone up. And what this means generally is that altcoins are losing value to Bitcoin. Well, that's exactly what it means. Altcoins are losing value to Bitcoin. And you can see if we sort of go here, sort of October time, you can see when altcoins had that little pump, Bitcoin lost a bit of its dominance, but basically reclaimed it. So this is all the time when Solana's pumping. And Solana's pumping before that, Solana's pumping beginning of October. What's Bitcoin dominance doing? it's rallying. So it's still gaining value from the crypto space in general. So even though there's some altcoins that are vastly outperforming Bitcoin on its US dollar price, in general, Bitcoin is still outperforming the majority of the market, and it's outperforming it in a serious way. You can see that we get a few corrections here, but again, that's fine. That's kind of normal. We do get a few corrections, and even here again, we have a bit of a pullback, and we go put in some low here, and then we rally right back up. Last week was obviously a good week for the Bitcoin dominance because now we're close to these highs and we're at this resistance again. And you can see we've wicked above and now we're currently below. And this does show sort of Bitcoin's price is really volatile at the moment because of this spot coin ETF that, first of all, we haven't broken above this resistance. And second of all, it's in a prime spot to either break above or move down below. It's a pinch, you know. You can even see this sort of trend line that I've drawn. It's not too great. Looks better on the daily, to be honest with you. I'll try patch it up a little bit. Maybe it will look a little better. You can see we sort of bounce here and here and here and here, and then we've broken below it, and now we've come back to it. So we are quite pinched at the moment in the trend line that Bitcoin has followed for well over a year on its dominance. We are now currently showing weakness paired with this strong resistance that we didn't break above last time, even though we have wicked above it a couple of times, and even this week we've wicked above it. We still haven't closed above. So this could be the start of a reversal maybe on the Bitcoin dominance. You have to be aware that maybe plans don't unfold and things don't happen like you expect. I expect dominance to go up, might not happen. I've personally priced in 60% for the Bitcoin dominance. That's where I think it will top out this year. I don't think it will go above 60%. And that kind of comes back to this Fibonacci retracement level. We see taking it from basically one halving cycle, 1 4-year cycle. We can see that Bitcoin dominance enters. We take it from the top of where the price starts at, or the dominance, starts at. And we draw it all the way down to the low. And we can see that the high, once it breaks below, is the 0.62 level. And again, taking the fib from our high to our low here, like before our high to our low, once we broke below, past, like had our significant drop below the 0.62 level as well on the fib level, we eventually managed to come back up and touch it. And that is usually towards the end of the cycle. Now again, we're running out of time on this sort of halving thing, but that could just be the fact that it spills over into 2024. Again, another thing to remember is these halving dates are happening earlier and earlier and earlier in the years. So for example, the one in 2012, if we go back to this chart, I think was December time. Yep, November sort of time. And then here, 2016, it was July. And then the next one was May. And then this current one is April. So we are slowly losing time. I don't think that's a big excuse, but if you were to add a couple more months, maybe for June time for an actual 4 years, it might seem more feasible that we have a move up. Again, I think there is just going to be strong moves to the upside, like we see here. These sort of explosive weeks where Bitcoin just goes crazy. And to be honest with you, now is sort of the time that we might expect something like this to happen. We've come to this strong resistance. We've come to a pinch on this trend up. And me personally, from looking at what has happened and trying to make an educated guess based on historical data, I think we will probably move to the up. I think Bitcoin's price over the next few months and years is going to do extraordinary things. I think it's going to go way up. But I think for that to happen, Bitcoin's dominance does need to go up. And I think this 0.62 Fibonacci level is something that we are probably going to get close to or maybe even reach. Again, it goes as well to a quick look at the Bitcoin Ethereum pair. We can see as well that Bitcoin is coming up to a pivotal point, and it's actually a very similar sort of resistance on its Bitcoin Ethereum pair. But what's interesting is we actually closed below on the Bitcoin Ethereum and then rallied back up. So green candles means Ethereum is outperforming Bitcoin. Red candles means Bitcoin is outperforming Ethereum. And we can see like for the last, since the bull run, basically, Bitcoin has outperformed Ethereum. There's been strong moves from either sides, but ultimately, as time has gone on, Ethereum has done worse comparatively to Bitcoin. But in these last few weeks, Ethereum's been fighting back a good bit. And we do often see a lot of money before the bull run move into Ethereum. If we go back to 2020 time, we can see that more or less as the year started, people started moving their money into Ethereum and out of Bitcoin, from Bitcoin into Ethereum, because the crypto environment started looking more appealing to take a little bit more risk. And most people are aware that in the bull run, Bitcoin is not what makes you a millionaire, not these days. It's other altcoins like Ethereum, like Avalanche, like Solana. Big movers that we've seen the last few days, not last few days, last few months. And this is where people often start to slowly move down the risk curve. So their Bitcoin turns into Ethereum. And then 2021 comes along and their Ethereum turns into Solana, or it turns into Cardano, or it turns into Avalanche. And then once it's 2021, end of 2021, close to 2022, it moves back into Bitcoin, or it moves into US dollar, or it's just cashed out. But it is kind of the way that a lot of big names make big money, by slowly just, okay, following the seasonality of Bitcoin and the crypto space. Bitcoin's done me well through the bear market. I'm now going to move into Ethereum because times are a little more bullish, and Ethereum is most likely to outperform Bitcoin when environments are much better. But it's still not a super low altcoin that has like a market cap of 1 million and could go to zero with a whale dumping on the market. And you can see that I basically, when I did this video a while ago, I said that we kind of will probably come up to here. This is our entry point that I sort of labeled out, and this line has been here in all my videos. You can go back and watch any you want. I did say that we put in these lows, and then most likely we'll rally up, which had already happened. So I said we had rallied up, but I think this will be close to our low on our Bitcoin Ethereum pair. But I do think there is a strong chance we could wick even lower down to this line here, this level of 0.4 on the Bitcoin Ethereum pair. And if you want to know why I thought that, go check that video out. It's a very interesting video. But ultimately I said we could maybe come down and touch this 0.4 level, but I wouldn't expect it to go much lower. And so far, we've managed to break down below this 0.55 level quite strongly. I mean, the other day we were at 0.49, I'm pretty sure. Yep, I was actually looking at the markets when that happened. And from there, all we need to do is make a move of minus 15% to get down to these levels that I've spoken about, which isn't too crazy, to be honest with you. Now, the Bitcoin Ethereum pair doesn't move all that crazily compared to the rest of the Bitcoin market. It's actually quite a stable pair to look at in a sense. And like if you take its most volatile moves, like from its all-time low to basically its all-time high, you can see it's 600% of a move, which is not crazy for Bitcoin, especially for like a pair that's been around for close to 6 years. But again, just something interesting to look at. And I hope it informs your decision, and that you can maybe be aware that this often does happen, like back here when we saw in 2020, the adjacent year to 2024 in terms of seasonality in the Bitcoin pair. We basically saw a lot of money move into Ethereum. And what we're seeing here, we're seeing money move into Ethereum as of this, strong move. And this shows that markets are picking up, but it doesn't mean that everything's all good. Like here we had a few good weeks and then a huge crash. And then if we take a look at that on the Bitcoin pair, we can see huge sell-offs. And again, this was the COVID move, but it kind of doesn't change anything. We still saw these happen again. The spot Bitcoin ETF could potentially cause price movement like this. I doubt it. I doubt it would be this drastic, but we could see a sell-off because it's happened every single halving, basically. And it shows on its dominance. It shows on the Bitcoin Ethereum pair, which has become quite an interesting trading pair to look at. And you can kind of use Ethereum to represent the altcoin market. So what you might want to take away from this video is that while after the halving, most likely Bitcoin will continue to do well and altcoins will start to pick up, sudden moves to the downside are not out of the picture. And in fact, we're sort of in the prime time with the prime conditions to have some sort of volatile move. And with one volatile move to one side, what goes up must come down. But hopefully you found this video useful. If you did, please comment down below. Let me know if there's anything you think I missed or you would have preferred me cover in the video. Leave the video a like if you want, and if you really want to help out the channel, subscribe, because we're getting really close to those 1,000 subscribers, and that would mean a huge amount to me. I never thought I'd ever have 1,000 people subscribed to my channel. I never thought I'd have a channel, but yeah. Thank you very much, guys. Take care and peace.